Hello everyone and welcome back to Amity Bloom. Today I have my journal opened for you and sharing with you the project that we're going to be making together. If you are familiar with my collaged paper borders, where I collage pieces of paper and I use them to add borders to the sides of my pages. That was a really fun project to do, and it was a great way to use your remnants of paper. However, this time I wanted to create some collaged paper borders that mixed together the beauty of paper and fabric. So I decided to revisit that project and change it up a little bit. So this time I added some fabric trimmings and I collaged them together, very similar to my collaged paper borders, but this time we're creating collaged fabric trimmings. And we're combining papers as well to create the base. So it's a really fun project to do. You can do it in a short amount of time. You don't need that many materials. And you can even do it if you don't have a sewing machine. And then here is some antique lace that flips out. You know how I love my flip outs. And then this one flips out as well. And you have one of my sentiment phrases. And it says, "Hear the birds' songs." And so that's hidden underneath that cute little fabric flip, which I love. Usually I use my fabric flips to do secret journaling, but you can also add really nice sentiments. And it's hidden, so it's kind of like a little peekaboo, like a little word peekaboo. I love how interactive it is and how it adds so much to the sides of your pages. And you can do this once your journal is finished as well. So if you purchase a journal from someone, or if you make a journal and you want to add more to it, I invite you all to take a peek into my journal pages and let's go on this journey of creating our collaged fabric trimmings together. The materials that you need to create your fabric trimmings are essentially laces, linens, cottons. I have some tulle here. You can use basically anything that you already have in your stash or that you have readily available. I simply recommend having an eclectic mix of different types of textiles and stay within a color palette that suits your project. Since I'm going to be creating my fabric trimmings for my Artist in Bloom journal, for my personal journal, I want to continue with the colors of my journal. So I pulled out some fabric pieces. I always keep a plate of paper treasures on my desk, and I keep little remnants and paper pieces from the project that I'm working on. And that way you use up the little bits and pieces that usually end up becoming lost in your room. I keep them on my desk, so have some little mini pieces. I'm going to be creating my fabric trimming for this page right here, and I just need a piece of paper that will cover this surface area. You don't want to cover the whole thing. You just need it to cover up a little piece of it. So let me actually fold it right where my page ends so that I know exactly where to trim it off. So you want a piece of paper that matches the height of your page, and then you want some other type of paper a little bit more structured so that you can use them as your bases in case you need to add more support to this page. And I'll show you how to work with these in a little bit. And then you also want just some other paper scraps and snippets, some strips. Whatever you want to use to add more of your personality onto your fabric trimmings. Even though we are going to be using primarily fabric, it's always fun to include both fabric and paper. To create them, you really just need scissors and some fabric glue. If you have a sewing machine, then by all means you can sew every little individual piece or just sew it at the end. To start our project, you want to grab the piece of paper that I mentioned previously, fold it, and tear apart. For this project, I suggest tearing instead of cutting with scissors, as it gives you a more natural and organic look that complements the fabric really well, I think. Then I'm taking that piece of paper and folding it into thirds, as this is the size that I'd like my paper base for my fabric trimming to be. Then I am adding some glue, and I'm going to glue it onto some thicker cardstock. Since this is some tea-stained paper, I need it to be more durable and have more structure, since it's going to become a tuck spot or a little bookmark, and you need that durability so that it doesn't become very flimsy when you add the fabric. And here I added some embossing, passed it through my sewing machine to do some contrast stitching on the sides, and I also distressed it a little bit. Now I'm taking some leftover embossed paper, one of my favorite little gems to include in my projects, and I am placing it on the bottom just to give different types of textures and surfaces on our little trimming. Even though we're working with something that measures about 2 inches by 6, you still have a lot of surface area to creatively cover up, and you want different little pieces to peek through. Now I'm taking some vintage ledger, a little snippet. If you'd see this on my table, you'd probably think that's the most insignificant little piece of paper, but when you apply it to your base, it transforms it. It gives it a different look. It goes really well with the color palette that we are creating for our base. Now I am taking another little snippet that has a little number on it to give a different type of font, different type of paper, and to finish the collage of my paper pieces for my base. If you'll notice, I'm sticking to pretty much the same type of colors, and I am leaving an area where there's no paper on the right hand corner because this is where I'm going to be including my fabric. Now I'm taking my favorite part, going through my fabrics, and I decided to choose this beautiful linen that has a striped kind of dotted pattern. Taking some vintage lace, and you'll notice the smallest pieces, but they add so much to the overall collage. Half the time when we're collaging, we don't really use a huge surface. We're creating little snippets, or we're adding more textures through fabric. And this is why I praise and I pledge, please don't throw away your fabric scraps. Use them in your projects. Sometimes the smallest little pieces will really transform a project. And in this case, I am taking a vintage quilt piece, the smallest little trimming. I'm cutting off the excess, or tearing it in this case, and I'm gluing it on the bottom to further bring the eye downward with the fabric collage. You don't want to overdo it, but at the same time, you want to make sure that all of the areas has something to offer to the eye. And now I'm taking the cutest little color of pink, a pale pink, and I am creating a little ruffle with it. And these fabrics that I used, apart from the mint fabric flip as well as the antique lace, were all part of our fabric bundles that I shared with you all, I believe, a month ago. I love working with the leftover pieces to create my own projects, and I tend to have a lot of fun with them because it's a challenge. When you have little miniature pieces all around your studio, it's a challenge to see how you can use them to create a cohesive and a complete project. Now I'm taking the smallest little bit of lace, and I actually wanted to add a button, and I thought it would be the perfect finish to this collage. And a little tip when you're working with buttons, I really suggest you hand sewing it instead of just gluing it on. It takes no time at all, a couple of seconds. Just be careful with where you put your needle, as I have been pricked lots of times before. But it makes your button look authentically sewn onto the page, and you also don't risk it falling off, especially if you're creating this project for someone else or for a journal. You want to make sure that it holds the structure of the button and to make it look really beautiful and vintage. Now I am playing with my little flips, and I think it would be really fun to add a little peekaboo. So I am taking one of my word sentiment phrases. You can find these in my Etsy shop if you're interested. And this one says, "Hear the birds' songs." I believe this is from the summer sentiment pack. And I wanted to back them up with some vintage music paper, I believe. And this way, using more scraps, but giving it a surface, a canvas, so that the sentiment phrase is structured and it doesn't get lost within the fabric. And I think it looks really beautiful in the end. And if you'll notice, I didn't cut that paper. I just ripped it at the bottom to continue with the organic and rustic look of our collaged fabric trimming. You can make it very large or very small. You can create multiple fabric flips, or you can add little pockets on them. There's so many things that you can do. It's all up to your creativity and what you're able to do with your hands, paper, and fabric. So now I'm taking my little trimming. I'm adding some glue on the top, on the bottom, and on the side to enclose it as a little text spot on the side of my page. And you don't have to create it into a pocket, that's just what I personally like to do. You can also glue the whole surface down so that it doesn't go anywhere and you don't have to include another pocket in your journal. Or if your journal is very bulky and you don't want to add more, you can always attach it with a paper clip, and this way you have a little floating trimming that you can move around in your journal and adhere it later if you want to. I really hope that you guys enjoy taking a peek into my process for creating my collaged fabric trimmings. They're really easy to make. They look a little intimidating at first, but once you see everything layer by layer, you'll become in love with the process of creating these beautiful trimmings to add to the edges of your pages. I want to thank all of you for taking some time with me today to play in our journals, play with our materials, and of course, until next time, I hope that you have an incredible day filled with peace and love. And stay tuned, as next week there are some really fun projects in store. Bye-bye!